The Home Office's behaviour over Windrush is deeply disgraceful and improper because it required the onus of proof to fall on lawful British citizens to show that that's who they were. Now, nobody, Julia, has asked either of us to prove that we are British citizens, and it fell on a small group of people deeply unfairly who are as British as we are. And the disgrace of that is very great, and the incompetence of the Home Office. And the whole approach, actually, that the Home Office got into the position of being unable to control immigration properly, unable to work out who was in the country, and therefore put the onus onto businesses and onto individuals to do their work for them when they were failing. And that has been very unfair and has made life difficult for people with a legitimate right to be here.
And so what's going to happen to EU migrants then? Well, there's no reason to think the situation would be any different, is there?
There is, because there's a plan as to what to do, and there wasn't a plan in relation to the Windrush group, so nothing proper had happened to help them. And the destruction of landing cards was deeply unfortunate at best, because then the Home Office wrote to people saying, we have no records of your right to be here. Well, they destroyed the records, which they didn't point out to people.
But is it your view that the EU migrants who might currently be worried that there's going to be another Home Office fiasco and it's going to lead to them being deported, losing jobs, homes, families being split up in the years to come, that they have nothing to fear? Because I've got to be honest with you, this is the first time I actually understand why they would have something to fear.
I think the programme here is much clearer. It's being set out at the beginning. It is a perfectly sensible approach. The Home Office is not good at anything in terms of these administrative schemes. It has a bad record, so I do see why people might be concerned. But surely even the Home Office can learn from its mistakes and ought to be able to cope with this. And it does, of course, need to set out soon, rather than shilly-shallying, what the policy will be for immigration from the EU once we've left, people who want to come after 2020, which it's singularly failing to do. So the Home Office needs to put its finger out to give reassurances. Yes, I understand why people may be concerned, but it is perfectly possible to have a proper system that will work.
Good morning to you, John.
Good morning.
Good morning. Are you hopeful the Home Office has a plan and they can deal with all this?
Not really.
Thought not.
Yes. No, I mean, they've got a long track record of this, and they were aware. Organisations like mine would go appearing before parliamentary committees when the legislation was going through Parliament.
You've been flagging this hostile environment legislation, which is all about basically making people prove effectively they're in the country legally. And this is the thing. The Home Office is sort of, we didn't know this would be a problem. We've got loads of evidence now. This has been flagged up by lots of different organisations.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Yes, that's right. I mean, there was a long queue of us, and we were going in there saying, look, it's the business of being a documented migrant in this country is incredibly complex. People aren't in an illegal position because they've done something wrong. Yeah. They're there because immigration policy is in a constant state of flux, something like 30,000 changes to immigration rules since 2010.
Wow.
And the typical person, I mean, I'm involved in voluntary advice sessions to migrant groups across London. And the person who we're talking about here is not somebody who's committed a crime. They're somebody who wanders along from citizens' advice bureaus, solicitors' offices, the sessions that I'm involved in, with a plastic bag which is full of papers and correspondence with the Home Office that goes back over years. Yeah. And they are completely baffled and bewildered why they're in the position that they're in.
And they're not getting anywhere. I mean, this is the thing. Surely this should have been flagged back in 1971. It was said, yes, don't worry, everyone who's been here, you can stay. But no one thought that actually people might need ID. Do you think a lot of this is just the assumptions of, let's be honest, white middle-class politicians, that, well, everyone's got a passport, everyone's got ID, everyone can prove their status. And actually millions of these people are coming over here to Britain, working in low-income jobs and just simply would never have had access to a passport.
But I think that's absolutely right. I mean, we've all got fixed in our model, in our minds, the idea of the reasonable person who's doing things a proper way. They're living an absolutely bog standard life. Once a year they'll go on holiday to Torremolinos or whatever. So the Home Office has got their situation constantly under review. Whereas, in fact, a lot of these people came in, they were doing, quite humble jobs, working, in public sector, in kitchens in the NHS, working in retail or whatever, changing their jobs on a fairly regular basis. Employers that they worked for 5 years ago are no longer in existence. Their businesses have closed down.
Well, but what if you've had if you've had a family, you've had a fire in your family home, you're not going to have anything at all. But is there an issue though that I'm a white middle class woman with an English accent. No one is going to, when I go to the NHS or I go to go and buy a home or rent a home or a job. No one's going to say, "Oh, can you prove you're British?" They're going to assume that I am. Is there an issue that there is actually an element of racism in this? This is happening to Black Caribbean people. Is there an argument there that this is something that doesn't happen to white people?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the element of racism is what we've learned from the Macpherson inquiry and Stephen Lawrence, all very topical at the moment. But this notion of institutional racism, it might not have been deliberately intended by the people who set up the system, saying we're going to make life hard for black people. But they built in a set of conditions and presumptions about the way the system will operate, in which the net effect of it is life is going to be made more difficult for groups of people amongst whom black people are very disproportionately represented. Now, that amounts to racism. That's institutional racism. And there's an awful lot of that right the way across the immigration control system. It's time and time again, whenever you find that immigration regulations are changed, which are intended for one purpose, when you look at the people who are actually most directly impacted by it, it is a group of people who are disadvantaged for one reason or another. They're always on the margins. They're the people struggling to get by on limited incomes. Their lives are in a state of flux pretty generally.
And no one takes notice until it gets on the front page of the newspapers and on the floor of the House. Don Flynn, thank you. No, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Sorry, out of time. Former director of Migrants Rights Network. Could have happily talk for much longer, but I must bring in my guests, Russell Quirk and Benjamin Butterworth, listening to what Don Flynn had to say. Do you agree that actually it may not have been intended as a racist policy? Because I felt very uncomfortable. I think the R word is thrown around too much these days. But is there an argument that actually, this is going to? The reality is this does impact people who aren't white skinned more than people who are white skinned.
There's just no doubt about it. And I read research either yesterday or the day before that found that they put black people applying to rent a flat, and they looked at how often they were asked to prove their status in the UK, to prove their employment and their citizenship, and far more often in this experiment was the black person asked to prove it than the white person applying for the same flat.
Even with an English accent, with no reason to question.
So there's just no doubt, and I think it actually comes back to a lack of diversity in a way, that the sorts of people that run the country, the sorts of people that get senior jobs in Whitehall, are all the same sort of person, and it just doesn't occur to them.
They're like me. And I think all of us, members of the sharp-elbowed middle classes.
Yeah, but look, I think it's a stretch to call this racism. I can see why you would perceive as such, because it's differentiation. But you take the property sector as an example, where there's now an obligation for lettings agents to ensure that people have citizenship or a right to remain. Look, I'm going to court controversy here, but is it improbable to assume that someone with an accent should therefore have to prove that they are not that they are a British citizen or otherwise? So it's not a skin colour thing; it's an accent thing.
So someone with a white person from Eastern Europe would be asked to
I see that you're Romanian, or I see that you're from Pakistan or from the Caribbean. Surely, common sense says I'm much more likely to ask you for identity than I am someone that comes in and that is clearly, inverted commas, a British.
Yeah, although of course a lot of these people from the Windrush generation, they've been here since they were sort of 8-9 years old, have British accents, are British citizens, and of course if they were white, they probably wouldn't be questioned in that scenario. I suppose that's where it falls down. But anyway, time is against us. It's been an absolute pleasure having your company. Russell Quirk, founder and chief executive of the property website emove.co.uk. Benjamin Butterworth, journalist for Pink News and the iPaper. Thank you for your company. Thank you for your comments. I hope you'll come back with us. I hope you can enjoy the sunshine. The time is 8:58. This is Talk Radio.